Hi everyone, this is Tyler Constable again. Welcome to the notifications training video. And here we're going to talk about the different types of notifications. We're going to go through a couple slides on how to set it up and what there are with output channels and actions. And so this is the basics of notifications.
To begin, under the settings, a few things will need to be made for the mail server. So you'll see there's a mail host and a mail port. And depending on how your mail server is set up, there's a possibility a user and a password would be required. When it comes to notifications, notifications are based on status. As we've seen in the checks video prior, there is critical, warning, okay, unknown, and disabled. Critical, warning, and OK are pretty self-explanatory. Unknown and disabled become very important within Avantra notifications. Disabled is when something is manually set to disabled and can be notified on or not notified on. Unknown is automatically triggered when certain checks go into critical status. Why this becomes important is there's a parent-child status. A great example is system availability. If system availability goes into critical status, all other checks associated with that system go into an unknown status. What that allows us to do is send out a notification for system availability, but suppress all alerts for the do not send for everything that is an unknown status. So as you see on the right-hand side, when we get into the system, we're going to see different criteria that we can notify on. So by having all the checks go into unknown status, we will leave that unchecked, and all of those messages will then not be triggered out. An email notification is really based on three different steps. First, there is the check status. So as we just described, depending on the thresholds and the check, what the check status is. The second is the notification action. So which checks should be alerted on? Avantra is bringing in many checks, and it may not be necessary to notify on every check status. So the action is going to be where we're going to select which checks we want to notify on. And that can be done through a check selector. We will also send up the resend options from here as well. Then there is the output channel. Now the output channel can be an email, a text via email, a push notification to the Avantra app. It can be setting something up in ServiceNow. It can be pushing out different APIs to third-party solutions or homegrown solutions. It could be working on some of the SAP automation or cloud action automations. It could be to run a script. It could be to write to a file. So output channels and notifications are more than just emails. It's a way for the Avantra system to interact with automation, third-party systems, maybe just writing things to a file, or to alert via text or email. So in setting this up, let's say we have an example where we have three different teams: the infrastructure team, the basis team, and the development team. All of them are going to be getting email notifications out of Avantra. So each of those teams will have their own output channel. Then we can then take the actions that are based on the checks and decide which checks go to which team. So in this example here, CPU, memory, and disk space will go to the infrastructure team. Lock tables, update statistics, RFC inbound and outbound will go to the basis team, and so will batch jobs and short dumps. And at the same time, perhaps the developers would like to know what's going on with the in and out of the TRFCs and also get short dumps as well. So a single action can be spread out to multiple channels. So now let's get into the system and set this up. When we go into our Avantra screen, we will select the configuration dropdown and select notifications. You'll see that two different kinds of notifications are here. There's the notifications global and notifications customer. The majority of the time you will work on notifications global. The only time customer is chosen is if you are a managed service provider and want your end customers to be able to modify notifications themselves. So outside of that rare scenario, we'll select notifications global. I'm going to first go, you'll see a new set of tabs have opened up, and I'm going to first go to the channels. And for here, I'm going to select new, and here are all the different types of output channels that we just described, right? So we got create a ticket, create an email, rewrite a file, different API options, start and stop SAP, send something to the mobile application, run some kind of automation within Avantra. So a lot of different things you can do here. But for today's example, we're just going to do an email. So here I'm going to call this training email 1. And if I'm a managed service provider, I can now specify which customer this is for. If not, I can just select next and finish. On the bottom half of my screen, the output channel has appeared. This output channel is currently available for checks, changes, any CCMS alerts we may have, tickets within Avantra, which is very important to note, or any server events. The first thing I'm going to do is just set up for the sender name. So this is the name of the email that's going to come in. So I'll call this Avantra alerts. So when I receive the email, that's who's going to come in as, and then I need to supply, an email address. For this example, we'll keep this as it is. You'll see here there's some mail server. What we set up earlier in the settings of Avantra is all it is needed. The reason why there's this here is if you have additional mail servers, right? So maybe there's a situation where if you're a managed service provider, you may have emails going out through your email exchange server or your exchange server or whatever email server you have. And then maybe your end customer would also like to have a mail server. If that is not needed, you can keep these as default and not select them. Now comes the time that we need to select who is going to get these alerts. So I can select here and select the different Avantra users that should be getting the alerts that we're going to set up soon. So here we'll set these up. I could also use a group as well. So the groups, if you've watched the user training video, you can use those groups as well. Lastly, in the user administration, when you select your user, it's going to be going off of the email that is provided here. If you would like to send a text message, you'll set it up to your alternative email address here, which is your phone number at your provider's email. So it could be your phone number at att.net or at verizon.com. A simple Google search will find out what that is for you. It's also possible, instead of managing all the users from the notification, you can use a distribution list that you may already have. There are 2 different ways of doing that. You can create a user that only has in the email address the distribution list, and that user would only be used as a mean of outbound communication for the distribution list. The second way is there's a little hidden feature. If we go to our settings, and in the search box, just type in the word raw, R-A-W, and this will pop up here, the notifier.enabled raw email address. Select this to true. When you go back into our notification, you'll see that this raw recipients box has now appeared. Select edit, and now you can add the distribution list that you would like to send it to, and select. So now we can just set up straight to distribution list that way as well. If you're looking to set up outbound text messages, again, using the user ID alternate email, you'd select this box here. Now, as for what is going to come out in the notification, the email body, depending on what kind of check it is, will have some additional information. So like short dumps, it'll actually show which short dumps occurred in the body of the email. But it's important to know you can actually change the subject. So here you can see, this is what's going to come out right now. Avantra notification. Then we're going to have system name, the check name, and the check string status. But let's say I want to change that. So I can actually, let's say I want to remove this Avantra notification. And using this pencil over here, I can come in and see the different kind of stamps that there are. So perhaps I just want to select, the recipients. I can insert that, and that is now insert here as well. So you've got a lot of different opportunities to modify this as you see fit. So that is my output channel. I'm now going to save this. You remember this is called training email 1. Now I have to go do the first half where I'm going to select which kind of checks are going to be selected and identify that and connect it to this output channel. So to do so, I'm going to go up to my top tabs here and select the Actions tab. And I'm going to do an action for checks. And here, I'm going to call this Training Action. And here is where you would preferably use a predefined check selector. If you haven't already, make sure you watch the check and system selector training video. It really goes into some great detail as to how these are used and why they're used. So here for this example, we'll just use the one that is for customer A checks, right? So we've defined in our check selector in a prior video which checks we want to send out as an email. So in here, you can see the different criteria. Again, we do not want to check unknown or disabled. We just want the alerts to go out when something goes into warning or critical. We'll select next, and now we're going to select the output channel that we just created. So in here, we'll go down to our training email 1, and I now have my output channel selected. And now I'll select finish. Now on the bottom half of the screen, I'm going to undock this to make this go full screen. I now have the training action. So here's my action. You'll see we've got some new tabs here. And under my properties tab, I can see my basic general setup, the check selector that we used to define which checks are going to be notified on, the details here, and you'll see the filter list and custom resolver. This is for some more advanced features, which we'll touch on in a different video. But it's going to go out for all these checks. If any of these checks go into critical or warning status, that is what's going to trigger our outbound email. But let's say I would also like this not to only go out once, but I would like it to go out every 5 minutes when it remains in critical. So now, when one of these checks goes into critical status, I will receive an email, or that the distribution list that we defined in the output channel will receive an email, and it will continue to email me every 5 minutes until the status changes, right? So if something goes into warning status, it'll keep sending out every 5 minutes until the warning goes back into OK status. Another way for the resend to be paused or stopped is, let's go into a system here, and we'll just go into this one here. I go under my checks, and let's say I'm getting notifications because there's too many short dumps occurring, and it's coming out every 5 minutes. There's a couple different ways I can do this. I can either come in here and change the status, right? Or I can actually confirm it. So I can say, all right, I'm confirmed, I'm working on it, I'm aware. So I will say, aware of issue, currently working on. And let's say if this continues for 2 more hours and I can't figure it out, I want it to go out of confirm status, and then it'll start resending every 5 minutes. So when I select OK, when we give it just a minute here, you're going to see the little red box is going to go into a confirmed status. And this takes just a minute for it to trigger here. And once it goes into that status, that will pause it'll pause the notification. So you can see the little white check mark there. Notifications will now be paused for this while I continue to work on the issue. The last thing to do is remember to save and activate your training action. It's also important to note that in the channels, you may have multiple channels. So here's the training email channel we just created, but perhaps there's another group that should get this as well. So I can actually select multiple channels as well. All right, so maybe I want to send it, maybe I want to create a ServiceNow incident at the same time I'm sending an email, right? And I also want to let another party know, maybe someone else as well. So I can start to add these over and over again, the different channels. So every time that this particular action goes into place, so for this particular check happens in warning critical, I'm going to alert or run these kind of automations or do whatever, so I can do multiple things at once. Now, another thing we can do in here is actually build out a filter. And why that's important is there may be situations where if you're a manager and you don't want to be notified on the first time an alert goes out, right? And the second resend option 5 minutes later, but maybe after 10 times, so if it's resending every 5 minutes, after I'll say 6 times, so after 60 minutes, now you want to be notified, right? You don't want to get notified for everything, but if something's happening for over an hour, you want to be notified. We can use what's called our filters. So we select our filters, and in here, I'm just going to create a new filter list. We'll call this training filter, and select finish. So now in here, you'll see on the bottom half, we'll see a default all pass. I'm going to open this up, and in here becomes different ways we can filter different messages, right? So different things you can do. But in the example we were just saying, you want to be notified every one notification starting with the 6th notification, which I believe is going to be 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, you want to be notified, or maybe because after an hour, what have you. We want it to go out, and now I want to receive this, right? So I can now create, that's my filter list. So now back in my actions, if I go back into my training action, it's going to be going out. I can now just use the filter list here, and now I've got my new training filter that I can use. So now I will only receive this message after the 6th time that it resends out. So this becomes very, very powerful, where you can have different messages, or I'm sorry, different triggers or different actions within Avantra doing different things: automation, alerting, updating ServiceNow, sending out emails to different people at different times, depending on how long things are in different scenarios and different statuses. In this training session, we covered the basics of notifications, creating an outbound channel, creating an action, and the use of filters.